What's up YouTube, my name's Australian and today I'm bringing you another how to play deck guide. Today we're going to cover Ezreal Kennen. This deck is an explosive deck that really takes advantage of a leveled up Ezreal and getting multiple copies of Kennen with cards like Kinkou Wayfinder and Godwillow Seedling. Let's take a closer look at how to play this deck. Let's start with Kennen, who's the early game powerhouse of this deck. But don't drop Kennen on turn 1 though, unless the opponent already has a unit played, because you don't want to lose the fleeting Mark of the Storm from Kennen, as this helps level up Ezreal, but because it's fleeting, if they don't have a unit, then it goes to waste. We want to level Kennen quickly with spells like Recall, Lightning Rush, Godwillow Seedling, Gruesome Theater, and Homecoming. Every time you recall and play Kennen, you generate 1 Mark of the Storm. Since Kennen got buffed, Mark of the Storm damage went from 2 damage to 3 damage. Try not to let this go to waste, and use it by the end of the turn because it helps Ezreal level up. And use it to either clear the enemy board pre-casting Mark of the Storm on units that may do a lot of damage so that you can stun it the turn later. You can also Lightning Rush the Ephemeral Kennen that comes from Godwillow Seedling. This actually cycles a card because the Ephemeral Kennen, which would have otherwise died, will go back into your hand. A quick call out is that Lightning Rush actually does 2 to anything, so you can also use this to deal 2 damage to face. This deck also runs 1 copy of Gruesome Theater. Even though this card can be used on any unit with 3 health or lower, I generally find it that I use it on my own units rather than the enemy units. When playing Kennen in the early game, make sure you have enough mana to use your protection spells like Recall or Retreat. Pay attention to what the enemy regions are and if they could run spells like Vile Feast or Hate Spike, because this is gonna clear your Kennen. Let's talk about Ezreal now. Ezreal creates a Mystic Shot every time he strikes the enemy Nexus, and when Ezreal levels up, every time a spell is cast, Ezreal will send a Mystic Shot straight to the enemy Nexus. It may seem tempting to strike with Ezreal because he has Elusive, but watch out for counter spells such as Sharp Sight, Quicksand, and Hush. Using a Mystic Shot also counts towards leveling up Ezreal. I generally don't summon Ezreal until he's leveled up in hand or at least has 6 or 7 of his level up condition completed. Once Ezreal is summoned, the game should end pretty quickly because of Ezreal's ability. Utilize Mark of the Storms with a leveled up Ezreal. I want to call out something that I think is pretty underrated here, which is Ionia Tailstones into Health's Potion. It's 2 mana to deal 4 damage at burst speed. That is incredibly OP. That's just 2 mana burst at burst speed Decimate. Let's take a look at how to really utilize Kinkou Wayfinder. You want to be careful on how you play this card. Keep in mind that if you already have a non-leveled up Kennen on the board, it makes it harder to level up Kennen when you play Kinkou Wayfinder. This is because now there's going to be 2 Kennens on the board, and when you recall one, the Kennen that you recalled turns into its champion spell, Lightning Rush, and you can't play it again. With that said, there's an amazing combo that you can do with Kinkou Wayfinder is using Godwillow Seedling on Kinkou Wayfinder. This summons an additional non-ephemeral Kennen on the board, and the turn after, or on the same turn, you can use Kinkou Wayfinder again for a 3rd Kennen. Another strong card in this deck is Sai'nen Thousand-Tailed. It's your only draw on this deck, and can also give your units +1/+1. I don't think it's too important to always try to get the value of that +1/+1 from Sai'nen. I think it's more important for you to use it as the draw, especially if you haven't found Ezreal later in the game. Another great combo with Sai'nen is also Godwillow Seedling, as it triggers the on-summon effect again and lets you draw 2 more and gives your units another +1/+1 only for 3 mana. You'll notice this deck actually runs very little units, and most units, aside from Sai'nen, are very fragile units. You generally don't want to block directly with your units, rather, you want to put your units up for the block and use your recall spells to recall your units back into the hand and deny the enemy attack like that. In the early game, you want to drop Eye of the Dragon, especially when you're constantly using spells to recall Kennen. At the start of the round, if you play 2 spells, which you generally will because of Recall and Mark of the Storm, you'll summon a Dragonling, which helps fight off early game aggro and also gives you a little bit of lifesteal. During the mid game, your goal is just to survive while trying to level up Kennen and Ezreal. By recalling Kennen, using Kinkou Wayfinder and Godwillow Seedling, and using Mark of the Storms to help level Ezreal, you're going to have a very strong mid game. You also want to try to develop 2 or more Kennens on the board. This deck really shines coming into the late game, with 2 cannons and a leveled up Ezreal. Once you have the attack token, you'll generate 4 Mark of the Storms since you get 2 from attacking and 2 more if they choose to block your cannons. You can also use cheap spells such as Ionian Tailstones into Health Potion to do an easy 4 damage with Ezreal. You also want to use your 1 mana recalls and your cheap spells in general. When you're thinking about what to mulligan, you want to look into what archetype your opponent is playing. If you're playing against aggro decks, you definitely want to keep Eye of the Dragon and Kennen and cheap recall cards. If you're playing against control like Feel the Rush, then you want to keep cards like Ionian Tailstones and Homecoming to send those beefy units back into their hands. Last thing I want to talk about is there's a few variations of this deck, such as putting in Navori Conspirator. Personally, I find Navori Conspirator to be a little slow, which, while it does help putting another unit on the board, I very little find myself winning the board with overwhelming the board with units, but rather using Mark of the Storm to clear the units and Ezreal to finish it off. So that's why personally, I don't like using Navori Conspirator in this deck. If you've enjoyed this video so far and want to see more from me, then please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me out. Let's take an analysis of how the pros play this deck. Let's take a look at this game. So right now, we're going to talk about Mulligan, we're going to talk about the combos they play, and how to kind of win the game. So right now they have Ezreal, they have Sai'nen, they have Homecoming. I'm probably thinking get rid of the Sai'nen, get rid of the Homecoming. They are playing against Lux Jace, so I don't think the Homecoming is that important, at least not early on, but let's see what they do.
The unique lineup against all these meta decks. There's a lot of diversity running around, and there may be some matchups he's more used to than not, but Kennen Ezreal dodges the ban.
So I think he actually... He got rid of his Ezreal too,
which is
actually.
Great. I love it. Like these are the 2 decks that I think I was most excited for, even though I love me some Evelyn Viego as well. But that may have taken the hit. It's either that or Pirate Aggro for Aaron, as we see the Forge Chief, right? The Forge Chief go down, and then the...
So you notice here, he has Kennen in his hand. He didn't play Kennen on the first turn because you don't get the Mark of the Storm. Now, there is the chance of using the cannons to kill off the 0-3 unit.
The Broadwing afterwards, setting up a very nice curve for Shang Ho, preserving that spell mana as well as Kennen goes down, and Kennen has the ability to knock out 3 health units now, which means that this Mark of the Storm will be hitting that Broadwing. Most likely, there it is, Pirates and Poppy Terry. Look at that, Panda, I got it right. Got anything to say about that? Like, that's pretty impressive, if you ask me.
That was a pretty easy one, to be honest.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Get the spotlight there, but kind of obvious one by, of course. Right. But another obvious thing will be a chance for this Kennen to get recalled. It looks like it's gonna be the case.
No, it's Twin Disciplines for sure.
Or Twin, yeah.
The Force, the Discipline of Force, will allow him to break through this Broadwing. Oh, yeah. Or just recall.
No, not always right my way.
Okay. I mean, I don't.
So I'm sure if you listen to the commentators, they're like, oh yeah, Twin Disciplines. But the recall here actually is a really good move because every time you use Mark of the Storm, you're helping contribute to Ezreal's level up. And Ezreal here is the real win condition. So using 2 Mark of the Storms also clears the 0-3 unit, the Broadwing, which is a really good move here.
The Twin...
I don't know if I agree with that play.
The Twin can be, I think, more relevant in more situations. It's more versatile as a combat trick. And in this case, you can just go for the clean double mark, get your Ezreal going as well, with a very clean hit on a very important unit that is the Broadwing Protector.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be neat to look at... I'm gonna take a look at this list to see, because it is a Lux Jace deck, but because when you're combining PNZ with Demacia, things get a little bit weird. Because you have a lot of resources within Piltover and Zon, like Mystic Shot, that all of a sudden don't really become an auto-include, because you have other stuff.
This is what I was talking about earlier in the video, where you want to just use your Godwillow Seedling on Kennen. That means in 3 turns, so I think in turn 6, you're going to have another Kennen show up for free, and that will also give another Mark of the Storm for free.
Like single combat into account, like there's a lot of key spells that kind of like bumping, which is also, a lot of times decks are not. Yeah, in this case, there is a full set of Mystic Shot, a couple of cards of Thermogenic Beam, but there's also Concerted Strike as well. So Twin Disciplines with a full set of Mystic Shot and a couple of Thermogenic Beam, like there are definitely really good uses for it. Even though Recall kind of accomplishes the same, but for 1 mana in a way. So I mean, I think both options were pretty much viable there. God Willow's healing goes down and protects the real Kennen. The fake Kennen will take a hit from this Broadwing, but Double Forge Chief here will allow Shanho to get back that spell mana and start building up for this Lux. Though he really depends, like he's really requires a good draw here. Not quite what he needs, because now Shanho it's a bit of an awkward position because he can't take advantage of his tempo advantage here.
This turn is very, very awkward. You can't play Lux yet. But so there's a straight pass from.
Yeah, that was a great pass. He didn't really have anything to play, and so you don't have to drop Ezreal here because your Ezreal has a chance of getting challenged. Especially in the Demacia, you can also get they can like just kill it off with a strike.
Aaron, again, same situation where it was an awkward turn, but you bait the opponent to thinking it's a good pass for them, and they end up taking as well. Same as we saw earlier in the tournament in round 1. Very similar situation, and now Lux on the board, barrier, still mana left over for next turn as well, and Kennen has to do his best to protect what is already a very scary attack here.
What's funny is that even though he's only got 3 spell mana, we could see like he could go for a Mystic Shot and get the spell mana back here, which is really interesting. As Mark of the Storm goes down and 1 Force Chief is going to be threatened. Actually, both of them are, as Mystic Shot goes down here, and the Twin Disciplines we were talking about earlier actually comes into play, and this is the big difference. You can set up this recall play and protect the unit that you're going to recall. This could not have been possible with recall instead. Like essentially, the lightning ping would have fizzled, right? So that actually makes a huge difference. That's a very, you know.
So just to take note, that is kind of what I was saying with blocking with your units. You want to block with your units and then recall another unit, and that way the attack kind of just fizzles out.
It's what I love about, it's the thing that I love the most about casting these seasonal tournaments, man. I always feel like I learn a little bit about how to play certain decks a bit better, just thinking ahead and choosing between 2 cards that seem like they're doing the same thing, but in situations like this, we see why Aaron went with that line of play indeed, as the Mark of the Storm goes on to Lux, but she has quite a bit of health down, so she won't be as easy to kill as others, even though now this double.
So here, if they block, the Kennen is going to generate 2 more marks, which is, I mean, there's 3, the plus 2, that's 5 marks. That is, right, I mean, there's another Mark of the Storm on the unit already, so that's a total of 9 damage dealt. That is an insane amount of damage.
Mark of the Storm threatens her immediately, though there is back-to-back.
Gonna take the damage instead. 1 Kennen dying with the Ephemeral there, of course, and now 7 mana to work with. Both players in a very crucial spot in their own game plans, where one mistake can be devastating on either side here. We're gonna see Ezreal is in hand for Aaron, and this is gonna be, I think, very close, or maybe already leveled up with how many times he's targeted units with all these different marks, of course, with the leveled up Kennen already.
I think something really interesting here is we're slow playing the marks, because we could actually use the marks again on Lux, but I think we're trying to see if the enemy is going to burn any mana and potentially burn, kind of get below the barrier mana.
Aaron passing over initiative, making use of these Marks of the Storms, not stacking them up, trying to see if Shanho commits a mistake, but I think it's clear to say that we are going to be seeing a back-to-back here from Shanho into this last Mark of the Storm, which will protect Lux and level her up, allowing him to also try to Final Spark away.
Trying to get the value from the Ezreal here.
You could hit the Ezreal now. Like you can now there's 2 targets.
So now that the Ezreal's dropped, you're going to see a lot of damage coming out from the Ezreal.
Yeah, Aaron may be thinking here he must have something, but he just goes for it anyways. Still has options there with the Lightning Bolt. Back-to-back is in. And Lux is leveled up. Got to get a +3 health boost, which will allow her to survive the storm. And the Final Spark will be targeting the Kennen or will be hitting the Ezreal. Gonna find out right now. It's gonna be hitting the Ezreal. Good call right there. We may see the a recall effect here. We do. Just go in face.
And this is already showing. We've done some damage with the Kennen on this turn with a quick attack. No blocks from Shanho, and
yeah, Considering the fact that he doesn't have another Ezreal in hand, recalling that Ezreal definitely is the right choice because right at this point in the game, Ezreal is going to be our win condition.
Now you have a chance to level up Ezreal and level up Kennen to really start stacking those marks and getting burst kills with Ezreal coming onto the board next turn potentially. And there's not really that much interaction on the hand right now for Changho.
There's only pressure. Like that's what Changho needs to do. He needs to just try to deal as much damage as possible and win with threaten with Final Spark. Albus Pharaohs can go down. Albus Pharaohs can deal some damage. The problem is it's too expensive, I think, considering the matchup. I believe it's tricky here. I mean, I think because of Palm has to happen.
Yeah, huge because of Palm here in this case. Ooh, taking the hits.
Playing it safe here. Okay, let's see.
All in on the Ezreal, essentially at this point.
If that was just a straight up progress day, he could go for it here, but because it's a Telstones, he needs one more mana. This is awkward. This is actually really awkward for Changho here.
And yeah, just an awkward hand, 2 turns on that mid-game turn, and now at this point as well, without the right support for the Lux in this case, going for the
Aftershock into Prismatic Barrier, Final Spark lethal. That's the game plan here, but that is super easy for Aaron to disrupt.
You got the Attune now, still have 4 mana up.
Yeah, this Final Spark is gonna go down.
So he still has Deny here for the Final Spark, which is why he had the Attune from the Eye of the Dragon.
And this is a Deny. This is a Deny.
And no spells in hand for next turn. Ezreal being elusive as well can go in for some chip damage onto the Nexus. 8 damage now.
Changho's top deck here. There are options. Like there are. There's a one off of Sharp Sight. There's also
and Deny is found as well.
But it's just another unit.
So now when Ezreal goes for face, he's going to get a Mystic Shot, which does 2 damage. He's going to chip in 2 damage already, so that's 2 plus 2 is 4. Plus, when you use the Mystic Shot, it's going to do another 2 damage, which is 6. And then you essentially just use Ionic Tailstones, which is 8, which is already lethal, and then Health Potion, which is 10 damage.
This is looking really good for it. This is a very tight game, but this Ezreal seems like it's going to be able to close out the match. Because this Palm leads to... Wow, that's risky.
Yeah, going for the greedy one, actually.
Well, I mean, you have to deny for a Shock Blast. But... Yeah, deny for Shock Blast actually does it. Jace goes down.
Personally, I thought that was actually also a little greedy too. I think he should have just swung, but at the same time, he doesn't really know what the opponent has in hand. But if he swings, I think that he would have had lethal as well.
Just swing with everything, I think. Yeah, you just gotta go all in. The Tailstones can also be just 2 damage. Tailstone into a health potion, which allows him to just lethal his turn.
And that's it. Burst lethal from Ezreal. Game 1 goes to Aaron, and an awkward hand.
Yeah, so as you can see from that, Ezreal Kennen is an incredibly strong thing. Just make sure you utilize Ezreal in the late game, and this deck is incredibly fun to play. Enjoy!